I'm currently on the northwest side of the eye wall here in Daphne, on the outer fringes of it, starting to get that hurricane force wind gusts. Already seeing some significant damage in the roadways.
Heavy rain and intense wind hit many parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida last night and today. Power outages, streets that turned to rivers, and as much as 6 to 7 feet of storm surge in some areas. That's what Hurricane Sally did to the Gulf Coast. It made landfall about 6 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time Wednesday morning near Gulf Shores, Alabama. And tonight it's a tropical storm, but still causing problems. Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. I'm meteorologist Wes Hohenstein in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're glad you're here with us tonight. We continue to track Tropical Storm Sally, which has weakened throughout the day. We just got a new update from the Hurricane Center. I'll pass that along to you in a second. It dropped relentless rain, spawning damage and power outages across the Florida Panhandle and Alabama. And many others are still dealing with problems tonight. Heavy rain and a tornado threat. We're going to go up and down the Gulf Coast from Louisiana to Alabama, and we're going to check in with some of our sister stations' live coverage as some cities around the country are still in nonstop coverage as this storm continues to impact many people. Here's the very latest. Again, it made landfall around Gulf Shores, Alabama, which many of us know because over the years, that's where we've driven or flown to on family vacations, some of the prettiest beaches in the whole world along the Gulf Coast in that part of the world. After moving inland, it continued to weaken significantly. And while the center of the storm is in southern Alabama tonight, you can see the heavy rain impacting Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, even some of the rain reaching up into North Carolina where I am tonight. So the very latest, we just got the 8 o'clock update in from the National Hurricane Center. 45-mile-per-hour winds. So obviously, since it's over land, the winds continue to notch down very slowly, but gusts are as high as 70 miles per hour. And speaking of slowly, remember 24 hours ago, if you were with us last night, the storm was moving 2 miles per hour. It was moving forward 2 miles an hour. It's now moving 7, which technically is faster, but that's still a slow mover. And that slow movement is why so many people in the southeast are under concerns of flooding. So even though the storm is now a tropical storm, still producing some pretty strong wind gusts. Remember, we always look for wind gusts around 40 miles per hour. That's when we know things are going to start to change. 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts, that's when power starts to go out. Trees come down, power lines go down, creates a whole different set of problems. So right now, as we look live at some wind gusts, there's Montgomery, Alabama with a 39-mile-per-hour wind gust. A 37 in Greenville, Alabama, Troy, 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So these aren't as strong as the 100-plus mile-per-hour winds that this storm had when it came ashore early this morning. But it will continue to weaken and continue to produce a large amount of rain. As we head into the overnight hours and Thursday, it'll move into parts of Georgia. It'll move into parts of South Carolina on Friday. Remember, this is the forecast track of where the center of this storm will be. But as we just saw from the big picture, look how wide the swath of rain is. So as the center of this storm slowly moves in that direction, so goes all the rain. And that's why so many people are under some type of flood watch. More on that in a second. Let's look at the futurecast first of all, and then I want to check in with our guests. But as you can see, I'll pick it up from 8 o'clock tonight. Lots of rain in Alabama and Georgia as the maps go into motion. That huge swath of rain by Thursday morning at 7 a.m. still creating heavy rain issues, a tornado threat for Georgia, South Carolina, and parts of North Carolina. By Thursday afternoon, things start to dry out in Georgia, but heavy rain continues in South and North Carolina, as well as parts of Virginia. And as we get into the early morning hours of Friday, that's when most of the rain finally starts to move away. And I know a lot of us are looking forward to a real taste of fall as we head into the last weekend of summer. But a flood threat for many of us. Here is the excessive rainfall outlook, the flash flood threat. And you can see, look how many states from Georgia to South Carolina and North Carolina in a high risk of some flooding, as some spots could see more than 6 inches of rain in a short amount of time, but many others still in a low to medium threat. Here are some of the forecast rain totals as we head into tonight, Thursday, and Friday before this wraps up. And look at all the areas from Georgia to South Carolina and North Carolina. Could see anywhere from 2 to nearly 6 inches of rain. And this is from a hurricane that made landfall in the Gulf Coast. And that's why so many from Florida, Alabama, Georgia, all the way up to parts of Maryland and Virginia are in some type of flood watch. So again, here is the latest radar. Heavy rain and a severe weather threat, the biggest problems right now. That includes, for our first guest, I want to take you to Alabama. Joining us right now from Birmingham, Alabama, is Chief Meteorologist Ashley Gann from our sister station. Ashley, we talked to you earlier in the year, and maybe we're the ones who jinxed it. We started talking about comparisons to 2005, and here we are, a record-breaking season. Before we get to that, tell us what you guys are worried about, what's going on in Alabama tonight.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me on tonight. We're really kind of in the middle of Sally right now. Being located in Birmingham, we're about 4 hours from the coast. We've been tracking Sally since yesterday. Well, longer than that, but really the real threats since yesterday, as you mentioned, a very slow-moving storm. To put this in perspective, Sally's moving at about 2 miles per hour at its slowest, so just offshore yesterday. Michael Phelps swims at 6 miles per hour, so Michael Phelps swims 3 times faster than the hurricane was moving. And then another note is that Hurricane Laura was moving quickly at about 15 miles per hour, so nearly 7 times as fast as Hurricane Sally. So when a lot of people question the impact and say Laura was such a bigger storm, I use air quotes, than Sally, why has Sally seemingly created a lot more damage? And there's a lot of reasons to that, but when you have a fast-moving storm, these storms don't sit and rain themselves out. That's what we're seeing right now. That's going to be one of our biggest issues here for central Alabama. The rain's supposed to pick up in intensity overnight tonight, continuing through tomorrow morning. Our easternmost county is going to be hit hardest with that heavy rainfall. I would say one silver lining is even though the rain is consistent and persistent, we're not seeing those pockets of deluge rain where you could have rain rates of up to 10 inches an hour. So we're just seeing more steady rain. Oftentimes with more steady tropical rain, at least the gutter systems can do its job and the runoff doesn't overflood the system and overflow the system. So flooding has not been a concern thus far. And because it will be overnight, most people will be at home. There won't be as many cars on the road. So we're hoping the danger level goes down for us, even though the rain threat's still going to be present. We're hoping that the consequences of some of this active weather happening at night when most people are at home and not a lot of people are out and active will actually help our situation. By early tomorrow, the rain should be out of East Alabama, moving into central Georgia. Then they're going to be the culprits. A lot of a wet mess, I should say, as we head towards the end of the week. And I like how you said a minute ago that fall is on its way. I know that's one thing we're really looking forward to in our forecast here. If we can make it through about 12 more hours of rain here in Alabama, I think we can say goodbye to Sally and we can say hello to a taste of fall here in the Deep South.
Yeah, we've got 50s for overnight lows coming to central North Carolina. Just to give everyone an idea of where Ashley is, again, she's in Birmingham, kind of on the edge, but remember, she covers a lot of area in central and northern Alabama as well as off to the east. So this slow-moving storm going to continue to dump rain. Ashley, one of the things we're worried about here in North Carolina tomorrow, as well as our friends in southern Georgia, the tornado threat. Talk to us about why, since you guys are on the north side, why tornadoes aren't a huge concern for your part of Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to divide these storms in left and right. So we're sitting to the left of that center of circulation. Because we're on the left side of that storm system, we're not going to be impacted by those dragging bands of rain that typically produce the thunderstorms. And those thunderstorms are what generally produce those spin-up tornadoes. Those spin-up tornadoes, as you well know, can be spontaneous in nature. They're generally smaller and shorter lived. That doesn't necessarily rule out that we could have a rogue storm that is larger. We have had up to EF2 spin-up tornadoes before. But in saying that, they're just a little bit more unpredictable. You know that there's the ingredients, but it's very conditional. All those ingredients have to come into play. But for us, we're going to be on a rainier side of the storm. So we're essentially on the side that's wrapping around all the moisture. So we're in, as mentioned before, Birmingham, Alabama. You might be familiar with Interstate 20. It basically takes you from Atlanta all the way to Texas. And so Birmingham sits on Interstate 20, and that really runs through through the center part of our viewing area. And then north and south is Interstate 65, which a lot of people, if you've ever been down to the beach, mentioning travels down to Gulf Shores, you've taken I-65 more than likely. So in saying that, we're going to be on that left side of the center of circulation. Right now, most of those storms are in the panhandle of Florida, and they will be moving up through South Georgia and then on their way into the Carolinas.
All right, Ashley, great scientific explanation because, you know, not everyone, it's amazing how these storms work out. Sometimes they're symmetrical, sometimes they're not. I want to ask you about an anniversary because while we're covering Sally today, while North Carolinians are remembering Floyd that hit 21 years ago, you guys got an unfortunate anniversary today for parts of Alabama.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. On the anniversary of Hurricane Ivan, which made landfall at Gulf Shores almost the same time, 16 years ago to date. Hurricane Ivan made landfall at around 2 o'clock in the morning, and Sally made landfall just before 5 a.m. Central Time. So only a few hours apart in their landfalling time and on the same landfalling date. Hurricane Ivan was one of the more devastating hurricanes that have ever hit the coast. And we actually got some sound from an emergency management official down on Gulf Shores and Orange Beach earlier today saying that some of the devastation down there might actually be worse than Ivan. We're not going to go out there and quote that just yet as far as on the record, but hearing that in that conversation just goes to show that these storms, they obviously pack a big punch. But yeah, 16 years ago today, Hurricane Ivan made landfall. I was in Alabama at the time. I was actually a student at Auburn University, and they had shut down the university because the original track was supposed to bring it a little bit more into East Alabama where Auburn University is, but it actually stayed more towards the central part of the state, actually came up through Birmingham. So what's kind of ironic is that the track that Ivan was forecast to take is actually the same path that Sally's taking right now.
All right, Ash, stand by with us because we're going to bring in Ed Bloodsworth down in the Mobile, Biloxi area. Ed, I know you guys have had a heck of a day, landfall in your neighborhood, essentially. Kind of take us through what y'all have been going through there and how things are looking at this point.
Yeah, the last 24 hours has really been quite something. You know, we started our team coverage here at our station yesterday evening as the eye was only about 50 miles off of our coast, but it was such a slow-moving system. It was came on shore with a movement at northeast around 2 miles per hour. So, and it didn't make landfall until 4:45 this morning, and that provided a couple of big issues. We started to see conditions deteriorate pretty steadily as we went through yesterday evening. So Tuesday evening, we started to get tropical storm force gusts through the afternoon. Then we started to get hurricane force gusts right around 8 o'clock in the evening. And then, of course, it just started to get worse from there. But we kept seeing this eastward track. And, just back on Sunday, the Hurricane Center had this making landfall west of Lake Pontchartrain, and it just shows the difficulty with forecasting these slow-moving systems. But we had some areas pick up 15 to 20 inches of rain. A few spots actually got close to the 2-foot mark, 24 inches of rain in southern Baldwin County, where it actually made landfall near Gulf Shores. That area saw some of the worst flooding, and actually that extended east into the Florida Panhandle, where they also picked up 15 to 20 inches of rain and storm surge right around 4 to 7 feet as well. So this was not only a major saltwater threat, but certainly the freshwater in terms of the rain. And that's really caught a lot of people off guard. We had flood emergencies issued last night.
Ed Bloodsworth and Ashley Gann with us tonight on Tracking the Tropics. Ed, I know you're in the middle of it, so tell us when you have to go. But I want to ask you, what's the worst thing that you guys have seen in the past 24 hours with all the damage in your area?
Well, the good news, I could actually spend a little time here with you because we've actually now come out of our continuous coverage. The system has now exited our area. Things are actually pretty quiet, a little bit breezy on the coast, but still we've had over 400,000 customers without power in this area, and it's going to take, a couple days up to a week to get the lights back on for many folks. But, conditions have slowly improved as we've gone through the second half of the day, even with the system moving north through our counties. What was really kind of shocking, we talked to a lot of people today, and for a lot of them, this kind of took them, off guard in some ways, especially for a lot of the native folks who've been here on the Gulf Gulf Coast for decades, who went through Frederick back in '79, who even went around the Gulf Coast when they went through Camille and went through Ivan. But they thought a lot of them thought this was just a Category 2. But it was we always said it was going to be the water that took everybody by surprise. And it's kind of a flat part of the Gulf Coast here, and so when it rains, the water just doesn't really run off very quickly. So we had water inundating people's homes. We had boats that got displaced fairly far inland. We actually had a piece of a big chunk of a brand new pier out at Gulf State Park get completely washed away. And then a big chunk of the Pensacola Bay Bridge, which recently got completed after years-long renovation, a big chunk of that got taken away by the surge from Sally.
Ed, I'll get you out of here on this one. I know it's after Labor Day, but you guys have some of the best beaches in the world, and it always seems, no matter what the weather, good or bad, people must go to the beaches. What has it been like in the beaches, considering what we're doing with schools these days in the pandemic, considering we just had a Cat 2 storm? What's been it like along your beaches?
Well, really, you go back to these last couple of holidays, our beaches have been packed. Go back to Memorial Day weekend and even Labor Day weekend. As you mentioned, it's some of the best beaches on the Gulf Coast you'll find here down at Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, and that goes all the way to Fort Walton Beach, Destin, and Pensacola Beach as well. We had a lot of folks here who were vacationing down here who decided not to leave and endure their first hurricane. And for most of those folks that we spoke to, they said that they never want to go through one of these again. So, it just kind of shows you that living on the Gulf Coast and living in a bit of a paradise, I heard from the mayor of Mexico Beach when I visited them after Michael. He says, living in a bit of a paradise, once in a while you have to pay the price. And this time we did pay the price.
You did. And boy, you guys have been at it for a long time. That's Ed Bloodsworth down at WKRG in Mobile, Alabama. Ed, I'll let you get back to it. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on Tracking the Tropics. Ashley, I want to bring you back in, Ashley, because, we had you on earlier in the season and we knew this was going to be an incredibly busy season. And you've actually done a lot of research, Ashley, on the 2005 season, which we all remember was such a busy season. I'm looking at some of my notes here from the statistics so far this year. We've had 7 named storms form this month. Sally is the 4th hurricane to make landfall. Teddy's a hurricane now. It's the 8th of the season. What are your thoughts on what we're living through right now compared to 2005?
Very similar in many ways, honestly. We ate up the alphabet. The pre-assigned names for 2005 were on our way to Wilfred, which will be the final pre-assigned name for this season. The next question becomes, well, what's next? And it's the Greek alphabet, of course. And we started into the Greek alphabet in 2005. So I think that this year will be very similar in that. So alpha could be next, beta, so on and so forth. And I believe in 2005 we got through Zeta. I think we had a tropical storm. Our last hurricane was Hurricane Epsilon in that year. So kind of interesting. So it's the only time in my lifetime that I remember us going into the Greek alphabet for that. And I might be getting a statistic a little off here, but I think the last time we had either 9 landfalling storms or 9 named storms at one time was like early 1900s. I need to go figure that one out. But there is something like 1919 was the last time we had 9 storms, and I want to say 9 landfalling storms here in the U.S. So I'll go. Phillips Klotzbach has a great Twitter account. He has some fun some fun hurricane facts for that. But yeah, likening this to 2005. And when we were talking on the show earlier, when I was on a while back, we were talking about how early these storms were named. And we were looking at these storms being named historically early. And I think that we could continue to see some of these storms named all the way through the Greek alphabet as well.
Ashley, I got you here. I had that same little trivia fact. The most continental U.S. landfalling storms in a single season was 9 in 1916. So you were pretty darn close.
There you go.
I had to write it down.
Yeah.
You have a better memory than I do. So we're on our way.
I missed out the 6th, and
And neither of us were around back then, so we were very, very young. Ashley Gann, such a wealth of information, not only about what's happening to you guys in Alabama today with Sally, but also what happened in 2005. Hopefully, I say this every time things get busy, hopefully we don't see you again this season, but I have a feeling we'll be talking down the road. So that's Ashley Gann in Birmingham, Alabama with us tonight on Tracking the Tropics. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks for having me.
So Ashley just mentioned how busy the 2005 season. These are the top 10 or so busiest seasons on record. So 2005 had 28 named storms, so that took us through our normal list and we went into the Greek alphabet. So at this point in 2020, we have 20 named storms. That ties for the 1933 season, which also had 20 named storms. But remember, we have some other activity out there right now that at any moment could become our next named storm. So working backwards, here's everything we've gone through this year. We've made it all the way through Vicky. Of course, Sally is why we're on special edition of Tracking the Tropics tonight. Wilfred is next, and then we would go to the Greek alphabet. And we've only done that one other time in 2005. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta. And in 2005, we did make it all the way to Zeta. If you go back and look at the records, you will note that there was an additional storm added to the list. It's an unnamed storm that was analyzed after the season. Occasionally that happens. It's a little strange when you look at the record books, but we made it through Zeta even though we only had 28 named storms. So what about what else is out there? Do we have Wilfred forming? We're going to go to South Louisiana and talk about that. But I want to show you one thing before we do that. This is a tropical wave that has come off the coast of Africa, and right now the National Hurricane Center says there's a 40% chance of that developing in 2 days and a 60% chance of developing in the next 5 days. So that might become Wilfred, or we have another system in the Gulf of Mexico that could develop. And for that, I want to bring in our next guest. I want to head down to South Louisiana. We talked to him earlier in the season when they were dealing with another hurricane. Heath Morton is the chief meteorologist at KLFY. Heath, good to see you again. Bring us up to speed. I know Sally has moved inland, but we can't let our guard down yet because there could be something else brewing in the Gulf.
That's right, Wes. Thanks so much for having me on. Yes, I'm a little concerned about this one. This may become Wilfred or either Alpha 1, but starting to show some structure down there across the southern Gulf of Mexico. And the models are kind of all over the place. One thing that is consistent, all of the models show a lot of rain over the Gulf of Mexico, 15 to 20, maybe 25 inches of rain. So what we're hoping is all of that will stay offshore. But by looking at this thing, you know, it may go to the north, back to the west. It may churn down into the southern Gulf of Mexico for a few days before doing anything. And it looks like there may be a piece of energy that comes north over the weekend that could cause some heavy rain south of New Orleans, just offshore, maybe even in the southeastern Louisiana. So we'll have to watch that. But I definitely think this is going to be the next named storm. Like I said, whether it's Wilfred or Alpha, we're not for sure yet. But impacts anywhere from Texas, Louisiana, maybe even as far east as Florida, if it makes it to the coast. Some models don't even put it up as far north as the coast. But one thing that does concern me too is we had a Melda last year at this time that hit southeastern Texas. That was kind of a surprise storm, a tropical storm. It dumped 44 inches of rain near Beaumont. Those are the type of systems that really scare me because we had a big flood here back in 2016. Some areas seeing 25 to 30 inches of rain. You get those slow-moving systems. And looking at the models, it looks as though this one's going to meander some. It's not going to move that much. So we're good as long as it stays offshore. But if it moves inland and slows down some, that's when we're going to have problems. Not too concerned about a strong hurricane or anything, but I think this one could be a pretty decent rainmaker somewhere.
Heath, the other big story outside of the hurricanes is a strong cold front moving across a good part of the country, bringing cooler temperatures. Every once in a while, one of those cold fronts makes it to South Louisiana and then gets caught up in the Gulf of Mexico. Are you guys keeping an eye on how that cold front could combine with that little disturbance behind you and cause more problems?
Exactly, yeah. I've been looking at that today. I started looking at that closely last night. The good news is it brings us some slightly less humid air, cooler air. Not going to see the 50s like you guys. I wish we would, but we're probably about 3 or 4 weeks away from that. But we're looking at maybe 69, 70 degrees at night, lower humidity. But yes, it's going to drop into the Gulf. Anytime we have that this time of year, you have to watch those fronts. You get low pressure that develops along it, and it looks like it's going to try to interact with that, and we'll see, how much interaction there is with it. But there is some dry air to the north behind that front, so I'm hoping that's going to keep it over the Gulf and kind of limit it from moving to the north, as it looks as though it tries to move into that drier air and some of that rain dissipates or stays over the Gulf. But yeah, that's a big key factor. Once you get fronts in here in September and early October, you have to watch those for formation along those. Also in the late spring, early summer, May, early June, you can still get fronts through here that can be a problem too, as you can have a low that develops along that front that stalls out.
Yeah, indeed. Heath Morton on with us tonight from South Louisiana on Tracking the Tropics. It's a special edition tonight. Heath, you guys have already had 4 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico this year. How did you guys do with Sally?
Sally, we were very fortunate. We saw that north wind. Actually, it was good weather for us. We had a north wind, a little less humid. We had some pretty rainbows last night from a few showers that came in on the backside of Sally. So it was actually a decent setup for us. I was really concerned Sunday when the model started shifting farther west and had it moving right over New Orleans. I will say the models handled it poorly about 72 hours out, as the error was about 150 miles there. Luckily with the Laura, the models were pretty good in line a couple of days out where it was going. But Sally, we didn't have a whole lot with that. We fared well. Higher tides across the southeastern parts of the state, of course, but Laura was a big one. And we had Cristobal at the first of the year, went over toward New Orleans. We didn't see much from that, but it's been active. The Gulf over the last 3 or 4 years has been really active, really since 2017. This year, of course, the worst, and we're hoping that we'll finally get a break here soon.
Heath, we've been talking about some history that's been made on this day in history. Floyd hit 21 years ago. Ivan 16 years ago. It's occurring to me, these are the F-name storms and the I-name storms, and we're getting ready to talk about the W-name storms. That just goes to show how incredibly busy this season is. But you have your own story with Ivan, which made landfall 16 years ago. You were covering that also in Alabama, right?
Yeah, I was in Huntsville, Alabama, at the NBC affiliate up there, and that was a long day. We were on all day covering that, and I remember it coming up through Gulf Shores and up across Alabama. We saw a lot of rain, had a lot of tornado warnings. It's hard to believe that it did hit land. It made landfall 16 years ago to the day in almost the exact same location. But yeah, I remember it well. It seems like forever ago, but then again, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But a lot of folks don't think that 300 miles inland you see a lot, but you can see a lot of flooding rain. You can still see a lot of tornadoes, and even the winds were gusting 40, 50 miles per hour up there across North Alabama when Ivan made its way up across the state. So yeah, that was one of my bigger ones, I guess, hurricanes to cover in my career, my first big one, I should say. Of course, I've had a lot since then, but it was interesting to see. Then, of course, the next year we had Katrina, which was a big one, too, that we covered up that way.
Yeah. 2005, we're talking a lot about that season. That was the Katrina year, unfortunately drawing a lot of parallels to what we're living through right here. All right, Heath, I said it, 4 hurricanes in the Gulf. I hope there is not a 5th, but we appreciate you being with us tonight on this special edition of Tracking the Tropics. That's Heath Morton down at KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana. Heath, we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks so much, Wes. I appreciate it.
All right, take care down there. All right, so that about does it for us on this special edition of Tracking the Tropics on this Wednesday night. So we leave you with the latest from the National Hurricane Center. What was a Category 2 when it made landfall about 6 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time this morning is now a tropical storm, moving 7 miles an hour off to the northeast, but still plenty of problems ahead for our friends in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. a heavy rain and flooding threat, along with the threat of severe weather, including tornadoes. We'll continue to keep an eye on this. If it's coming to your town, please stay weather aware. And don't forget that we are here every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern for Tracking the Tropics. On behalf of Ed and Heath and Ashley and everyone working behind the scenes to make tonight's show possible, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. We'll see you next time around on Tracking the Tropics. I'm Wes Hohenstein, Raleigh, North Carolina.